Hello, my lovelies. Today we will read Poseidon's Prodigy, Cast Adrift, written by Striker Sky, Chapter 4. Just because I was a god didn't mean I couldn't be in pain. Hell, if I had to keep up these fake smiles for the kid, I was going to drive myself insane. Percy didn't believe them. Instead, he seemed to be getting even more reclusive, needing to spend more time alone. He had been holed up in the cabin all day, claiming to need to be alone. Even Pollux and Castor had not been able to get a word out of Percy. I knew I would have to tell him the truth, now how his mum abandoned him, but it just seemed so cruel to do to the kid. I went to the cabin, knocking on the door. "Okay, Percy, open up. It's time for dinner. You spent enough time holed up in your room." There was no answer, only silence. I tried again and again to get Percy to come out. "Percy, come on, son. I know you've been acting a bit strange, but it's just because we don't want you to be hurt. Percy, you always have a place in our family. I have something I want to tell you." I opened the door and went to Percy's bed, only to find it empty. It had been a long time since a good God felt so powerful. It had been a long time since a god felt so powerless, and this was one of those moments. "Percy!" I rushed out of the cabin, scanning the surroundings for any sign of Percy. The evening felt heavy with uncertainty as I called out his name. Again, louder this time. Castor and Pollux emerged from their own cabin, worried etched on their faces. "Dad, what's going on?" Pollux asked, glancing around as if expecting Percy to appear out of thin air. "He's gone," I replied, the weight of those words sinking in. "Percy's gone, and I don't know where he went." Castor and Pollux exchanged glances, alarmed glances. Realizing the severity of the situation, we started searching the camp, checking all the familiar places Percy might have gone to. As we combed through the grounds, the truth I had been avoiding weighed heavily on my mind. Percy's mother had abandoned him, leaving him alone and confused. It was a painful realization. I couldn't shake off the guilt for not telling him sooner. Where would he go? Why did he leave? And the answer hit me. Home. The twins looked at me. Percy went home. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. Percy went home, back to where he believed he belonged. I knew that Percy's definition of home wasn't Camp Half-Blood. It was with his mother, Sally Jackson. The guilt and sadness intensified, realizing the pain Percy must be feeling. We searched camp tirelessly, calling out for Percy, but there was no sign of him. Castor and Pollux growing more anxious with each passing moment. I couldn't blame them. I couldn't shake the feeling that my attempts to protect Percy had only pushed him further away. We reached the borders of the camp. I hesitated. The protection around camp made it challenging for demigods to leave without permission, but Percy had managed to slip through. A mixture of frustration and worry thrilled within me. I considered the possible dangers Percy might face beyond the camp's safety. "Dad, what are we going to do?" Castor asked, his voice filled with concern. Pollux's foot hovered close to the border, almost crossing. I swiftly pulled him back by his shirt and kneeled down to my boys. "Castor, Pollux, you stay here. I'll go get Percy." "But we want to come," Pollux protested. I shook my head, understanding their desire to help, but realizing it was a journey I had to make alone. "I'll be back with Percy at most in 24 hours. I knew they were worried for their youngest, but I couldn't promise them Percy would be okay, not when he was a tasty meal from a monster. Despite the turmoil within me, I didn't let my emotions spread onto my face. I gave the boys a hug before waving, a teleport knowing where Percy was going. It was simple. A hop, skip, and a jump to the home of Sally Jackson. I sat outside the apartment building. Percy would be coming here sooner or later, and until then all I had to do was be patient. sipping on some Diet Coke. I watched the mortals walk by. They paid no mind to me as I waited until the boy with ocean eyes arrived. Percy appeared, and I stared at him blankly as he panted. His face was a mess. His clothes were all grimy. It made me wonder how long had he been walking, how challenging the journey was. He looked almost the same as the day he returned to camp from the underworld. He stared at me, unspeaking, confusion evident for a moment, as Stuvaya beat him here and launched on the stoop. I rolled my eyes and raised my hand, a silent request for the item he had in his bag. He hesitated before figuring it out, pulling out a replica of the chalice, handing it to me. Water, I muttered grimly, and the cup filled with water. I placed a cloth in it before pushing the makeshift cleaning tool over towards his face. "Hey!" he protested loudly. I'm flailing as I cleaned his face. "I'm not letting your mum see you with dirt all over your face. Hold still," I commanded, even as he tried to escape my impromptu grooming. Despite Percy's protests and attempts to evade the cleaning efforts, I persisted, ensuring that the dirt and grime were wiped off away from his face. He squirmed, but I managed to clean him up, much to his surprise and annoyance. "There you go, much better," I said, looking satisfied with my handiwork. Percy huffed in response, clearly unimpressed with my unexpected act of fatherly care. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt for keeping him in the dark about the truth regarding his mother. "Come on, Percy, let's head inside," I said, trying to sound casual. I led the way into the apartment building, making my way to Sally Jackson's residence. As we approached the door, I hesitated, unsure of how Percy would react to what awaited him inside. It was time for the truth to come out, and I braced myself for the storm that might follow. We entered the apartment. Percy's apprehension was palpable. The air felt heavy with anticipation. He prepared to face his mother after a considerable absence. Percy glanced at me, clearly uneasy about the situation. "Are you coming?" he asked, a torch of irritation in his voice. "Think of me as a chaperone," I replied, attempting to ease his discomfort. Percy reluctantly accepted my presence as we approached Sally Jackson's door. "Are you mad I ran?" he questioned, his nerves evident. "No, you did what you had to do," I reassured him, taking a sip of my Coke. "I like you better like this. You were all happy. It's kinda weird," Percy remarked, offering her a quick hug. "Thanks, though, Dad." And I felt cruel for not trying to stop this, crueler than forcing him to stay. But I would let this play out. We approached the door, and Percy, his nerves evident, knocked hastily, hardly giving himself time to collect his thoughts. However, the person who opened the door was not the petite woman we were expecting. Instead, a large man stood before us, emitting a rather unpleasant odor, even from a distance. He was bald, attempting to conceal with questionable comb, who Percy instinctively took a step back, his hand latching onto my shirt. It became apparent who this man was. He was trying to discover why you should never be hated by a god. He shot Percy a sour look, then turned to me with disdain. "Sally," he yelled back, "I thought you got rid of it." He added in the most childish whine. "It?" Percy retorted with disdain, and I could sense the brewing storm within him. The man, it pained me to acknowledge his name as Gabe, immediately moved to retaliate, preparing to strike my kid. Instead, of allowing Percy to unleash his pent-up anger and potential causing harm. Percy raised his arms, anticipating the blow. Acting swiftly, I positioned myself between Percy and the mortal, daring him to lay a hand on my thumb as I sipped my coke. Gabe's eyes widened as he hesitated, clearly unprepared for the confrontation with a god. I took a step closer, my presence radiating authority, and he stumbled backward. "What the hell's going on?" Gabe spat out, glancing nervously between Percy and me. Percy spoke up, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and defiance. "I'm here to see my mum. Where is she?" Gabe scoffed, a mocking grin on his face. "Sally doesn't have time for you. She's got a life now, and it doesn't include dealing with your kind of trouble." I felt Percy's tension rise, and before he could react, I stepped forward, intervening. "Enough," I said, my tone commanding. "We're here to talk of Sally. If you're smart, you'll step aside and let us through." Gabe glared at both of us, irritation evident on his face. Before begrudgingly moving aside, he muttered under his breath about inconvenience, and Percy shot him a scathing look before stepping into the apartment. I followed, keeping a watchful eye on the mortal, ready to intervene if he tried anything foolish. The air inside was thick with tension as we ventured further into the unknown territory of Percy's past. The apartment wasn't much, and the smell wafted out, a mixture of stale air, unpleasant odors. However, it served its purpose for masking Percy's scent, keeping him hidden away from potential monsters. In a small reflex, Percy placed his hand in mine, his tiny fingers guiding me inside while also keeping me close. The cramped space of the apartment seemed insufficient for Percy's needs and growth. I observed it with boredom, contemplating how inadequately this place was for him to truly live. Percy called out for his mum, Sally Jackson. She appeared just as I imagined her, small, unkempt, with noticeable absence of any spark or enthusiasm. Her demeanour was a stark contrast to Percy's vibrant energy. Percy, excited and filled with joy, let go of my hand and rushed towards her for a hug. "Mom!" Percy exclaimed, his happiness evident in his voice, as he reached out for a warm embrace. However, the reunion was halted abruptly. Sally looked at Percy with surprise, her tone tinged with confusion, as she said, "Percy?" Sally Jackson's surprise gave way to an uncomfortable silence. Percy's expression shifted from excitement to confusion. I observed the scene, sensing an undercurrent of tension that he hadn't anticipated. "Percy, what are you doing here?" Sally asked, her voice guarded with caution. Her eyes flickered uncertainly between me and Percy. Eager for the reunion, Percy replied, "I wanted to see you, Mom. I missed you." I was worried after I completed his sentence, stating the truth that she was kidnapped. Sally's eyes darted from me to Percy, her discomfort evident in the way her hand shook. "Mom?" Percy asked, his smile gradually fading as he seemed the unease in the air. "Percy, you can't be here," she declared, the words hanging heavily in the air. Percy's excitement evaporated, and Sally sighed into her hand. "Percy, it's not safe for me or for you." "Stepfather?" she explained, mentioning that the man Percy referred to as Sticky Gabe. Percy protested. "But he's terrible," Sally sternly replied. "You should show him respect, Percy." It felt as if Percy heard those words repeatedly, a painful reminder of a reality he couldn't escape. Sally sighed, her gaze dropping for a moment before meeting Percy's eyes. Percy, you don't have to go back to Camp Half-Blood. And she began, and a spark of hope lit up in Percy's eyes. But you can't stay here, she added. The hope quickly faded. Percy's eyes widened, and he bit his lip, a mixture of disappointment and confusion evident on his face. I raised my eyebrows, allowing a smirk to play on my lips. So what you're saying is, you don't want to claim Percy? Sally recognized my voice instantly, snapped her head back, her gaze meeting my glowing violet eyes that showed both anger and amusement. I don't see how this... She began to speak, but I interrupted with my finger. Remember, we're gods. You gods get offended very easily, and watch your words. Percy clung to my shirt, and Sally noticed it, her eyes narrowing. You're the god who claimed Percy. You're the reason he was disowned. She accused. Percy shut up. No, Dad didn't. I did. He didn't care for us, not for me. He didn't care about you, Mom, but Mr. D did. Percy insisted, depending my role in his life. Sally narrowed her eyes at me, a mix of skepticism and frustration evident on her face. Sally's anger erupted in a scream. Because of you, I will never have my palace under the sea. Percy took a frightened step back, uncertain whether she was yelling at me or him. You horrid child, she continued, directing her rage at Percy. He shook, visibly affected by the sudden outburst. I took care of you. I lived through so much, but you ruined it all. Sally's outburst had left Percy shattered, realizing that he was just a ticket for a better life for his mother. Uncertain of whether he was truly loved, Percy turned to me, desperation evident in his tear-filled eyes. Dad, he sobbed. I knelt down, embracing the boy, his face now cleaned, but still covered in tears, mirrored the pain that he felt. The heartbreaking scene resonated with the memories of Castor and Pollux, who had no choice but to leave a mother who no longer loved them. In response, I pulled out a piece of paper, offering a solution to end this painful chapter. Sign here, and he no longer is yours, I said almost robotically. Sally, holding on to Percy, took the paper like a golden ticket, sealing the end of Percy's association with the name Jackson. Percy, still wrapped in my embrace, clung to me as if searching for stability in the midst of the emotional storm. The realization that his mother had severed ties with him hit hard, and the pain etched on his face was heart-wrenching. I took the paper once it was signed, letting it vanish into my belongings where another one lied. The silence lingered, interrupted only by Percy's occasional sniffles. I placed a hand on the back of his head. I think it's time for us to go, Sally spoke. For once I hoped there was at least something good. Once you leave that door, he's your problem. Yape that mortal they called. Screamed for Sally to bring him a drink, adding to my anger as she rushed to get it. My face twisted into a form of a smile. But before I go, let me give you a blessing. My voice cracked through the thin air, carrying a tone of menace that elicited the fear I relished. That castle you want to live in shall always remain out of reach. You shall relieve every terrible pain my Percy had to. Sally looked ready to beg, but after a moment there was silence, music to my ears. I pushed Percy's head to my chest as I pulled the drink from Sally's hand, leaving her to live out her fantasies and madness. I carried the beer with no passion when it minute maid. Gabe huffed, unaware of the fate that awaited him. Finally, take the brat. Why don't you? Was eating me out of house and home. Oh, that made me smile. I pushed the drink into his hand, tilting my head, smiling. You hurt my son the most. What's it to you? Should have known the kid would have a bum of a father, and he didn't know how not to tick off a god. Mortal, for your curse, you shall live always hungry and thirsty, but nothing shall satisfy you until your end. And let's not forget, you too shall experience all the pain you inflicted on this child. What the hell are you talking about? He opened his beer and went for the first sip. I made sure to make it taste like piss, smelled even worse than he did. He shuddered, annoyed. Sally, what the hell is in this drink? I adjusted Percy in my arms as I carried him out of this place. I walked away from the miserable apartment building with Percy in my arms, leaving behind the chaotic mess of Gabe's life unraveling. Percy clung to me, his face buried in my chest, and I could feel the mixture of pain, betrayal, and confusion radiating from him. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on my shoulders. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I glanced down at Percy. His eyes were red from tears, and his small frame trembled with emotion. Percy, I spoke softly, I'm here for you. You don't have to worry about them anymore. You're safe with me. He looked at me with those troubled sea-green eyes. Dad, why did she do that? Why did she say I can't stay with her? I sighed, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes mortals make choices that we gods find difficult to understand. Your mother made a decision, Percy, and it wasn't about you. It was about her own life. Percy hugged me tighter, as if seeking reassurance that I wouldn't abandon him like his mother did. Am I a burden to you too? Yes, his voice small and vulnerable. I smiled, ruffling his hair gently. I told you, kid, I like troublemakers. He looked at me, his eyes searching for sincerity in my words. Thanks, Dad. I carefully carried Percy back to Camp Half-Blood, his body limp in my arms. Outside camp, I laid Percy down. Once inside camp, I laid Percy down on his bed in the cabin, tucking him in, whispered words of comfort as I brushed a strand of hair away from his forehead. I sat by Percy's bedside for a while, watching over him as the night unfolded. The tranquil ambience of camp offered. Pollock snored and Casper was rolling around with a blanket on. I rose from his bedside, tucking the twins into bed. With a final glance at their sleeping forms, I left the cabin, disappearing into the shadows of camp. The night air cleared a sense of calm, and as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that, despite the challenges ahead, Percy could have a place where he belongs here. Thank you for listening. This was the last chapter of the Poseidon's Prodigy cast Adrift. Next week we will start with the third installment of the first descent child of the gods. Bye bye.